Oh, hello. So there was a popular trend where people decided to just sit on poles. Well, pole sitting was a fad in the US during the Roaring Twenties, where average Joes with nothing else better to do, like me, or daredevils and stuntmen, would test their endurance by climbing up a pole, stationing themselves on it, and seeing just how long they could stay up there. And people were really into this sort of stuff back then. This is also the decade of the earliest form of dance marathons, where people continuously danced until they couldn't anymore. And this was all for throwing fun and competition. You also had stunt pilots as well who would perform aerial tricks high in the sky. The desire of doing something thrilling while getting some name recognition and even some money gave birth to this epidemic of pole sitting in the 1920s. Yet, this isn't even the first time prolonged, highly elevated sitting was done. There was a Syrian monk named Saint Simeon Stylites who sat on a pillar for 37 years praying and fasting. Simeon was known during this era, with some reporters comparing these pole sitters to the saint. And one of these pole sitters who ended up pioneering this movement of the 20s was none other than the self-proclaimed luckiest fool alive, Alvin Shipwreck Kelly. Kelly led the pole sitting trend of the 20s, but before pole sitting, he did many different things like being a steelworker, steeplejack, diver, boxer, movie double, stunt pilot, and even serving in the Navy. Now, there are different accounts as to how he ended up initially climbing up a pole. One story was that he was practically thrown onto it as a joke. Another is that it was based off of a dare, or that Kelly's pole sitting started when he was advertising for a film in Hollywood in January of 1924. This particular pole sit was the one that gave him his first start of fame, as he had sat on that pole in Hollywood for 13 hours. The feat went into the papers, and people soon attempted to beat the record and try out pole sitting. Shipwreck Kelly would capitalize on his own initial popularity and would soon go on tours and visit cities to sit on poles. And businesses would want Kelly because of the amount of crowds that he was able to draw to a particular place. Pole sitters began competing for individual records and business opportunities. So, how did the pole sitters do it? After climbing the pole, they set up a board or a chair on top. Then they would wait. Shipwreck occupied himself with daily activities like shaving, drinking milk, drinking coffee, smoking cigarettes, reading books, and reading the news. A lot of these items were inside of a bucket that would be hoisted up by rope and pulled up by pole sitters like Shipwreck. Now, weirdly enough, a few of the sources I looked at said that it was never recorded how Shipwreck went to the bathroom, or how these other hooligans used the bathroom either. But you gotta imagine they and Shipwreck used the bucket too, right? I know. You probably have your own theories as to how they really went to the bathroom. But I think it was probably the buckets. And another thing, Shipwreck slept by placing his thumbs inside of holes on top of the pole. Moving around would cause his thumbs to hurt, thus waking himself up to readjust himself. Soon, Shipwreck would be on poles for days rather than hours. In Missouri, he was up for 7 days. In New Orleans, he was up for 3 days. In Newark, he upped his endurance and popularity by staying up a pole for 13 days. But then came the competition. Another man named Joe Hold'em Powers would beat this record in Chicago and stayed up there for 16 days. He had to come down after smacking his face on the pole that was caused by a storm. Another man named Spider Haynes also sat on a pole for 16 days. And you also had Bobby Mack, a 21-year-old stunt pilot. She sat on the pole for 21 days. Shipwreck Kelly, however, had access to more popular venues. He was invited to Madison Square Garden to sit on a pole above a dance marathon, and he sat up there for 22 days. At Carlin's Park in Baltimore, he sat up for 23 days. But the biggest one of them all was at Atlantic City, on the Steel Pier, and he did this for 49 days. This feat would eventually be broken by Bill Penfield in 1930. where he sat on a pole for 51 days. There was also some other notable pole sitters that I read about. One was the story of Avon Foreman, a 15-year-old boy from Baltimore. He had inspired other boys and girls to take up pole sitting after he stayed up on a pole for 10 days in his backyard. And then later in the pole sitting trend was a man named Dixie Blandy, who absolutely wrecked the other pole sitters by being on a pole at Chicago's World Fair for 77 days. Now, unfortunately, you will see pole sitting gradually decline during the 1930s due to the Great Depression. There are still for sure people imitating Shipwreck Kelly though during this period. New pole sitters would actually add Shipwreck to their own personal name when doing a pole sit, or they would just call themselves Shipwreck Kelly, hoping spectators wouldn't know the difference. But with the Great Depression, suddenly nobody wanted to pay to watch someone sit on a pole for hours and hours without end. Many conclude that the Depression brought with it the end of pole sitting as a popular trend. Well, that's it. I hope that by showing this interesting part of American history, you'll come to realize that our generation is not the only one that is kind of goofy, weird, strange, and surreal. I mean, look at planking. That's pretty much the same thing as this, except I would argue it was more of an accessible activity that appealed to even more people. It is really all of us doing something as humans that hundreds of years from now will be looked at in awe, or most likely will probably be made fun of. Also, if you want to be notified when I post again, make sure to hit that subscribe button, and yeah, that's pretty much it. I'll see you next time.